A very good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all the viewers around the world. Thank you very much for joining. My name is Shan Baig, and I am the founder of Cloud Optics. And it is my honor and privilege to have you here today with us on our first webinar series, Continuous Security and Compliance in a Digital World. I just want to let you know a few housekeeping items before we start. Please do ask questions if you have any, and I'm sure you will definitely have a couple of questions in the process. A copy of the presentation slides will be provided to all the attendees or viewers of this webinar, and it is downloadable. So please make sure you get that copy for yourself. And in the end, please do not hesitate to leave your feedback. That is very much important to us. So kindly leave your feedback. And we also have an audience poll set up for you. Please make use of that facility so we get to know your opinions. And at this point, I would like to introduce to you today's speaker, Mr. Asim Rastogi, founder and CEO of Cloud Optics. He has about 20 years plus of IT industry experience, a real veteran in the security sector. And having said that, I would like to welcome today's speaker, Mr. Asim Rastogi. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Shan. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. It's a real privilege and honor to speak to you today on cloud security and various topics on the compliance side. So this is a series of webinars, and today is the first of that series. And we'll be taking this up today about a real customer and its journey into the security and how their organization is moving from the traditional way of doing business to the digital world. So before we just that, I'll just do a poll here and just see how what situation at your company here. So if you can just go to the voting and do a quick vote on that, that would be helpful. We'll give it another quick 20 seconds here. All right, so looks like our responses are rolling in. We have a tie between somewhat agree and strongly agree. All right, so it's a even actually. So if you see the results, it's evenly distributed amongst strongly agree and somewhat agree, and then neither agree nor disagree. So that's a 50-50 spread over there. All right, so let's now get into the scenario here. Now, so we are talking about a real customer we were working with, and in that customers, we have three roles, CISO, CIO, and infrastructure director, and let's call them Jane, John, and Bob. And we will just look into that, what are their responsibilities and what they have been doing. So John, the CIO, is moving their infrastructure to the cloud, and he is salivating at the opportunity to save the cost, which is about 40%, which is a huge budget there. And Bob is the infrastructure director who is sitting on top of the data center and managing it day in, day out, and is pretty happy on that side. And Jane is the CISO, and she is liking her compliance role there and in the current scenario. So today we are going to focus only on Jane, And in subsequent webinars, we'll focus on other roles and their challenges and how we help them going forward. So let's look at Jane's happy word today and what kind of challenges is she having and what fun she's having at work. So Jane has her asset list sorted. Jane knows the compliance required by her businesses and things like that. And there's an easy compliance checklist. So she has maintained the inventory of things and the requirement of compliance. And those items are checked on once a year or a quarter, depending upon the certification needs of the business, because our business needs a couple of certifications. And she has a team working with her, which is helping her collate the data from various sources and then translate that, massage the data, transform it, and create a coherent view for the auditors. So that's a fun teamwork, and she and Bob is working together. So that is the kind of setup they are having, and they are all enjoying in their current setup. Now let's look at what happens next. So now her CIO, John, decides to move on to a digital journey, and which is a organization-wide decision, and it is impacting everybody. Now, Jane is very worried. So let's see what digital journey means. So digital journey is our organization is going towards omni-channel, where customers are going and connecting with businesses every channel possible. So be social media or the websites or the mobile application, and customers are coming from all the channels, and it is pretty fast-paced. Because customers are coming from various channels, it's pretty fast. That's the digital journey all about, and it is hyper connected, and customers are very demanding because they are connecting via their mobile phones and on their time. Somebody is connecting in the morning, afternoon, so there is no set pattern these days. It's a pretty demanding set of customers out there. So this is a new paradigm of doing business here in a digital world. So why is Jane worried? Jane is worried because she is not sure whether her current processes of collecting the data and mapping the controls, etc., are going to suffice here in a new world. So let's take an example. I mean, to take a peek on how her world is going to look like in a digital scenario. So this is what Jane's new world looks like. We see that they have on-prem private cloud, off-prem private cloud managed by maybe third parties, outsourced. So these data centers worlds are not going away completely. They are still going to be there. However, things are going to be a little bit more fluid here from an IaaS point of view, from PaaS point of view. So there are going to be multiple IaaS providers like AWS, Azure, and the PaaS providers like Force.com, SQL Azure, Cloud Foundry, etc. And there is a need for these applications to connect back to the on-prem or off-prem private clouds for their corporate data, maybe SAP or something. And then there are SaaS services, maybe OneLogin or some other like maybe Trend Micro and all that. So that's the kind of scenario which is there in Jane's new world. And the challenge here is for Jane is visibility and security policy compliance, because these IaaS and PaaS are not necessarily speaking the same language. And simple things, whatever terminology AWS is using, not necessarily Azure is using. So there has to be necessarily a translation of some sort to bring this whole visibility into a unified mode here. So that's how new world looks like. Now let's look at some of the challenges up close here, what she's up against. Now first of them on a digital transformation journey is the DevOps. So earlier in earlier scenarios, our releases used to be once every 2 months or every quarter, max to max. If some organizations are pretty fast paced, they will do like once a month release. However, that's not the case now. People are doing releases. Let's take an example of Amazon. Few years back, they were doing a release every 12 seconds. I'm sure they are much more fast paced these days, and other organizations like Netflix and Google are not far behind, but Amazon, of course, takes the lead here. So that's the scenario where we are doing the DevOps releases very, very frequently. And the challenge now becomes, are these processes secure, and are the organization assets are still under control of our IT organization and CISOs? So that's one of the challenges. Visibility and information collection is a big challenge because there are multiple providers, multiple services within those providers, and it's very difficult to get the full visibility here. To give you an example, AWS might call firewall security group, whereas Azure may call it network security group. And if you go to some other provider, they may call it something else. And within that services also, they may call certain things within the firewall, how they configure rules. It may be completely different from another provider. But at the end of the day, from organization policy and compliance and security point of view, it's a firewall which needs to do a certain function. So that's the challenge. How do we bring this information, disparate information together and make it useful? And then there is mandate to control compliance cost. We know that internal resource cost for compliance audit is $250,000 per year per audit. So that's the kind of cost we are talking about. So CISOs are under mandate from CIO and pressure from board to reduce the cost. So that's the challenge they have. Now, assessing effectiveness of security products. So that's one of the challenges which organizations face, where they need to see it. So currently there is no objective metric out there which will tell something, some posture of security posture in one shot. Like there is no metric a CISO can review on a time scale basis every few hours or maybe every day, which can measure the controls and their effectiveness, including all of their products and the configuration. So that's something which is missing today. And that's the challenge which Jane is facing. How does she know that she is secure? And after that, not only she has to understand that whether she is secured or not, but she also has to provide the assurance back to her board and SECs on a continuous basis. Now, SEC has also jumped the gun on cybersecurity, where they have released a directive for all publicly listed traded companies to provide material information to the investors pertaining to cybersecurity. So that's additional challenge which Jane has to face going forward, where she has to not only assure her own management, but also the investors and other external stakeholders. So that's a very big challenge Jane is facing. Now, so what is her solution here? Let's take a look at that. So Jane's recipe for going forward is automated continuous security compliance monitoring. So let's understand these words separately a bit. That for these challenges to be solved, any processes put in place has to be continuous. So all the security postures and compliance posture has to be monitored on a continuous basis. And this has to be automated because there are multiple systems involved and multiple types of vendors involved here from say AWS or Azure or maybe private data centers. It has to be automated. It is not humanly possible to do it manually. So that's the crux of it. And this process will ensure that any gap which is found, any gap which is which is present, it will be found immediately as soon as it emerges, and then it can be plugged in. So that's the solution here. Now let's look at it a bit deeper and understand what is continuous security and compliance all about. And we will take a look at that using a real life example here from AWS machine backup. Now, whenever we take a backup, maybe via a DevOps process or manually, there is a configuration data which is out there. If you see on the screen, which looks ominous and ominous looking JSON object here, which is a backup configuration data, and the key there public says true. Now, what that public true means is that particular backup of the machine is publicly available. So anybody who is looking for publicly available images is going to find this particular backup, and then they can launch this particular image in their own account. So that's the problem, because any data which is there on this machine will be now under control of the person who is launching this machine. And that's not a good thing, because if there are some corporate data or say a corporate database sitting inside this machine, and all the data is gone forever, and we wouldn't be able to get it under control back. So that's the challenges which are there. And if we put continuous security and compliance in place, we will be able to detect it immediately that this something is amiss, and then we can take corrective actions right away, or maybe automate those challenges as well. Now, encryption, the second key says encryption false. So that means data at rest is not encrypted. And that will fail the compliance, because one of the compliance controls may mandate that data at rest should be encrypted. So these are the challenges which needs to be solved by continuous security and compliance monitoring. Let's look at some more examples here. During the DevOps process, which may be fully automated and is scripted, new machines may be added dynamically, and new machines may have some more configuration changes on the runtime. But do we know whether antivirus, which has been, say, configured on those machines, newly minted machines, is up to date? Do we know about the software stack which is running on those machines, which are coming and going as they please, as per our DevOps processes, are not vulnerable? So these are some of the challenges which we have to integrate these kind of security processes into our business processes and the development cycle. And last but not the least, can we assure our stakeholders that all of our cloud configurations and security settings conform to regulations and best practices? So these are the challenges which we seek to remediate via continuous security monitoring and compliance. Now let's look at some of the economics of the scenario here. Now this was done. This cost research was done by Ponemon Research Institute, and we see that as the audit frequency increases, the total compliance cost goes down, and it goes down by a lot. If we see that companies who are doing 1 to 2 audits per year, that is actually mandated by their regulatory bodies, and the organizations which are doing more than 5, the cost differential there is phenomenal. That's almost 50% cost differential, rather than $28 million to $12.82 million. So that's half the value which we are getting. So the outcome is pretty simple, that if we do the audit frequently and we increase the frequency, we will catch the errors early on, and it will be less costly to fix that, rather than waiting till the end and and then finding out a very big load of problems which we need to remediate because of our certification audits. Now, what if we don't do any of that? Which means we might be non-compliant. So let's look at what happens. So if we see the non-compliance, there are multiple cost factors. There are losses associated with business disruption, productivity loss, there is revenue loss, there is fines and penalties, etc. And the cost factors are pretty huge. If you see, business disruption costs about $5.1 million, and productivity loss $3.75 million, and so on. So which totals up to $15 million, almost $14.8 million. So that's a huge cost of non-compliance. Whereas if you look at the audit frequency chart, and towards the right-hand side, we see that cost of compliance is less than the cost of non-compliance actually. So it's actually economics is working in favor of doing something like continuous security monitoring and compliance in place. Now at this point, let's take a quick poll and see how are we seeing the operational processes of our organizations. Are they optimal? Are they not? So let's take a quick check. I'll give another 30 seconds here. All right, responses are rolling in. So looks like everybody strongly disagrees, 100% of the vote disagree that operational processes lack the optimal level of orchestration. Okay, I see that it's changing 50% now. 50% somewhat agree and some 50% strongly disagree. So that's a kind of a tie over here. All right, so that's the situation we have in our organization. Now the question is, are you ready? Are we ready? As security professionals, are we ready to take our customers to the next level? To keep everybody, our organizations and customers stay secure and compliance on a continuous basis, day in and day out, keep them ahead of the curve. So that's the big question we need to answer as security professionals. So what is the way forward? In our view, this is the process of a 5-step continuous process to keep ourselves and our company secure and compliant. Now, what are the steps? So step number 1 is we need to plan what kind of information we need to gather, what are the sources, and what are the asset lists, etc., right, which we usually do. And then from there, we need to understand the controls there in each of these services available and the products which we are using, and harmonize the controls. So by harmonizing the control, we have to collate the information, and it is a one-time job which we need to do. We need to collect them, harmonize it, and afterwards we need to integrate these disparate systems and their configuration data into a single platform, or maybe some homegrown system or what have you. And from there, we need to automate that, because it needs to be continuous. It needs to be iterative process here. And depending upon the business need, the automation frequency may be different. Say, for example, if we are having a DevOps high velocity system, we may require to monitor the situation every 6 hours or every 4 hours, maybe every 12 hours. However, in production, where things are not changing that frequently, we may choose to do it once a day, once in 24 hours, because releases are not happening, for example, that frequently in production, or depending upon the business need as much as we need. So that's the automation. Now, once that is done, then we need to continuously monitor for optimization opportunities and putting more KPIs into place, so that way we can stay on top of it. And this whole cycle needs to be repeated in an iterative fashion, bringing more and more scopes into and adding more and more tools and technologies into the scope. So in short, compliance is not something which should be a goal unto itself. Compliance should be actually an output of a well-run security programs. It's a byproduct or an outcome of well-run security programs. That should be our target to achieve, rather than trying to put a checklist on a yearly basis or a pre-scheduled basis to get it through and get the certification, because that's not what is going to keep us secure. So that's the way forward. Now let's look at how CloudOptix can help here. So CloudOptix platform supports multiple cloud providers, AWS, Azure, etc. And then on top of that, there is a platform layer which is supporting these platforms, which is extensible, and then security compliance monitoring layer. And on top of that, there are modules which are cyber exposure index. That's the objective measurement of security posture, encompassing everything, all the cloud providers and other third-party tools which are integrated, such as Qualys, CIS benchmarks, Trend Micro, etc. And then having other modules like cost optimization and insider threat prevention, and connected with ServiceNow, which is the ITSM tool for ticketing. So that's in short what CloudOptix solution is. And so we have reached to the end of the presentation. However, we'll take questions now, and if you want to get in touch to know more or request a free trial, you can always go to this URL on the screen, and then you can request that. Now let's take a look at some of the questions here. So the first question from our audience is it a SaaS service or a product? So that's a good question. CloudOptix is actually not a SaaS service. It is a product which you can control and install in any hardware or virtualization environment you need. So you can install it on VMware, you can install it on AWS, you can install on Azure, you can install anywhere you want. So that's pretty open architecture, and it does not depend on any underlying platform. Now this product also comes, CloudOptix comes in two different flavors, one for managed service providers and one for end users. So if there's a company who is trying to use CloudOptix for its own purposes, they can go for end user version, or there is an MSP version, managed service provider, where that's a multi-tenanted platform they can go for. So let's see. Other question is how difficult it is to install and run. So this platform is pretty intuitive and frictionless. Under 10 minutes, it can be installed. And depending upon the target account which has been integrated here, maybe AWS or Azure, etc., and how many assets are there, what kind of services are being integrated, results may roll in pretty fast. So let's say within a couple of hours, you will see the first results, and that would be pretty fast and frictionless. Okay. One last question I see is, what are the prerequisites for a platform to work with AWS? So yes, we do require certain access permissions, etc., to be configured in AWS account for us to work with, and they are pretty well documented in our documentation material, help text. However, there are different type of access which we need. So if it is only for monitoring purposes and reporting purposes, we will just need the read access. Or if we really want to put the auto remediation feature in play, then we will need certain write access as well, where we need to go and remediate certain items, maybe removing old backups or saving costs, etc. So that's pretty much it. Shan, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Asim. It was a pleasure to have all of you here amidst the inaugural match of the World Cup. Thank you very much for watching. I do see some very good responses coming in. And last but not the least, please do not forget to download the attachment that we have provided you with. It contains a lot of information about the product, and we do encourage you to get back to us with any questions whatsoever that you may have regarding the product or anything related to security and compliance. We will be more than happy to assist you in any way that we can. And once again, thank you very much, Asim, for doing this excellent presentation. I'm sure that our audience have been vastly benefited from it. Thank you once again, audience, and we definitely look forward to your feedback on this presentation. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thanks a lot.